Greetings to you all. My name is Vanessa Nakate, and I'm a climate activist from Uganda. And I'm happy to be speaking with all of you today. In the first week of January 2019, I held my first climate strike after seeing and researching about how climate change affected the people in my country, Uganda. I went ahead to read about how it specifically affects the African continent. This is when I realized that the climate crisis is the greatest threat facing our lives right now. And why is that? This is because the climate crisis is already destroying vast parts of the African continent. This is tragic and ironic when you think about how Africa is one of the least emitters of CO2 emissions, and yet it is among the most affected by this crisis. Historically, the entire continent of Africa is responsible for only 3% of global emissions, and yet Africans are already suffering brutal impacts of climate change, from the floods to the droughts, to the cyclones, to the heat waves, and this is destroying their livelihoods. This is more than weather. This is about the people. People have lost their lives, their farms, their homes, and their businesses. Cyclone Idai was one of the worst cyclones to affect the African continent, ripping apart and flooding large parts of Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. The strong winds and heavy rainfall left more than 1,300 people dead, and many more were recorded as missing. It also left an economic crisis. This year, the water levels of Lake Victoria have risen as a result of heavy rainfall in East Africa. Homes have been flooded, farms have been washed away, and people have been displaced. Southern parts of Africa have experienced terrible droughts that are leading to food scarcity and water scarcity. The water levels of Zambezi River, Lake Chad, and Victoria Falls are lower than they have been for decades. Lake Chad specifically has shrunk to a tenth of its original size in only 50 years. Half of Nigeria has no access to water. Remember that for every 1% increase in drought, there is a 2.4% decrease in agricultural output. To us, less rain means hunger, starvation, and eventually death. So what is the main response from the developed countries for the social and economic crisis fueled by climate change and the burning of fossil fuels? All we get from them is greater and greater investment in the exploration and extraction of fossil fuels. I have one thing to say to countries and banks who continue to fund the digging up and burning of fossil fuels in Africa. We cannot eat coal and we cannot drink oil. I know that we must find new solutions to tackle the climate crisis. I know that there are clean energy technologies that need investment, research, and development now. But we also need to massively increase support for the things we know will work right now. Project Drawdown is a well-respected ranking of solutions to tackle climate change. It lists the top 100 solutions that would contribute the most to the goal of reducing global emissions. Educating girls and young women is listed as the 6th most powerful solution for climate change. And why is educating girls and young women so important? girls and young women are disproportionately affected by the climate crisis. Educating girls has an impact beyond the individual, cascading into her family and her community. Research shows that women with higher levels of good quality education marry later and have fewer and healthier children, live longer and enjoy greater economic prosperity. Why are so few people talking about this solution? Why is so little money flowing to this solution? Why are there few stories talking about this solution? We need to be excited about this. We need to consider it and see it as the next shiny technological solution. We need to fund education and we need to do it on a massive scale, and we need to start right now. As I say, girls and young women are disproportionately affected by the climate crisis. In many African countries, society has given girls and young women roles of taking care of household chores, providing food, and collecting water. In the case of a climate disaster, many of these girls are exposed to working harder than they already do, to walking longer distances to collect water in case of water scarcity. They are exposed to backaches. They are exposed to gender-based violence as they collect that water. In some families in Africa, when they lose everything to climate change, they give up some of their children for marriage. And this is always the girl child, because there is a bride price that is expected. Many girls are being forced into early marriages. They are dropping out of school and they are being exposed to diseases like fistula, HIV/AIDS. Many of them get married to old men. We need to change this. And we can, of course, change this. We can't continue to have girls sacrifice the time they would have used in studying to collect water. We cannot continue to have any more girls exposed to gender-based violence. We cannot have any more child brides because of climate change. That is why it is time for the leaders to act. It is time for them to get behind the solutions that we know will work right now. If we are to educate and empower girls and young women, everyone has a part to play, and that includes you. Your voice is needed. Your platform is needed. Your resources are needed to make this happen. Let us educate and empower girls and young women for the planet, for the climate. That is the only way we will have a future that is equitable, a future that is healthy, a future that is sustainable. Remember, these are tomorrow's leaders, these are tomorrow's campaigners, these are tomorrow's scientists. We can all do something to fight the climate crisis. As I've said, your resources play a part. Your voice plays a very big role because you speak up for millions of people. Do something now. Be part of the change. Be part of the transformation. And let us make this world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to participate in the 2021 Drawdown Conference. What a great way to start the new year. My name is Sally Ranney, and I'm president of Global Choices. My perspective on creating a regenerative future reflects my work presently in the Arctic, focusing on sea ice loss. You know, we're facing a perfect storm, a confluence of all those hockey stick curves that Al Gore dared show us over a decade ago in The Inconvenient Truth. Well, now we can add the ice crisis. Polar ice is on the edge of extinction, particularly in the Arctic, where the sea ice is melting at unprecedented rates. Arctic sea ice serves a critical function. It reflects 80% of the sun's rays and heat. And this is called the albedo effect. It is essential to keep the climate stable and the earth cool. When the sea ice melts, the exposed dark water then absorbs the heat, warming the ocean, which contributes to warmer temperatures, which in turn melts more ice, and the cycle goes on. Since 1979, when NASA first started satellite monitoring of the sea ice, 95% of the old stable ice has disappeared, and 13.5% of the ice extent, the thinner seasonal ice, has been lost per decade. This has crippled the albedo effect by more than half. Sea ice loss has impacted the jet stream. It is now wobbly and more unpredictable, exacerbating more severe and longer lasting weather events. And the temperature and water column of functions of the Gulf Stream have been affected as well. The Gulf Stream is part of the Great Ocean Conveyor Belt, which starts in the Norwegian Sea and goes all the way around the globe. Arctic sea ice melt impacts are also suspected to have slowed down the entire ocean circulation by 15% to 20% in the last 30 years. And now it's at its slowest rate in 1600 years. None of this is surprising, given that the Arctic is experiencing 2 to 5 degrees Celsius increase in temperature. We also saw wildfires and permafrost thaw accelerated in Siberia, releasing methane and CO2 emissions. One study suggests less precipitation in the Amazon could be related to loss of Arctic sea ice, along with more severe droughts and floods in northern Africa, and even more severe tropical storms in mid-latitudes and further south. Many species are suffering. 4 million Arctic residents and indigenous peoples are struggling with impacts to their culture and resiliency. And yet, with all these major league systems at risk, countries and industries are jockeying for geopolitical position and competitive advantage to cash in on the resource riches that will be exposed by this climate catastrophe. The point is, the impacts are immediate and local, exponential, and global. The Arctic has been and is a respondent to climate change, but now it has also become a driver of climate change. Have we crossed a tipping point? There is still debate, and I think we still have time to stabilize the ice, and creating a regenerative future is the answer. So in response to the science and this unfolding situation, Global Choices is proposing 2 proactive, forward-looking initiatives predicated on regenerative tenets and the precautionary principle. We're calling for an immediate 10-year moratorium on willful harm of the Central Arctic Ocean and its existing sea ice, including a ban on deep seabed mining, oil and gas exploration, seismic testing, and a transpolar shipping route. In perpetuity, we call for no radioactive waste dumping and no nuclear testing. The moratorium is a timeout for this fragile and still partially ice-covered remote frozen sanctuary, which is also habitat rich with ice-dependent species both above and under the ice. It's a timeout so science and regenerative strategies around the world, along with global emissions reductions, can really kick in before we rush in for short-term gains that could irreparably harm the area. Our long-term proposition is to create an Arctic Global Commons Marine Reserve on the Central Arctic Ocean, which is not in the jurisdiction of any country. This is aligned with the proposed Global Oceans Treaty's 30 by 30 strategy, protect 30% of the oceans by 2030. And it saddles up to the international fishing moratorium. Because we now know that Arctic sea ice is a principal linchpin to global climate stability, it is the SOS of climate change, loud and clear. On the one hand, it is listed as number 1 of the 9 scientifically identified tipping points. And on the other hand, we contend it is also the bellwether for climate restoration, because the status of the ice is the litmus test for measuring the level of our success or lack thereof in creating a regenerative future. The fundamental tenets that are guiding our work is Earth systems are interconnected and interdependent. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And these tenets are the foundational platform for creating a regenerative future, alongside a reset of our mindset in order to reassess our values, reorganize our priorities, replenish ourselves, and repair our relationship with each other and the genius of nature. It is from this place that the Global Choices team puts regenerative practice into action. Perhaps the most important of these is moving from egosystems to ecosystems. Regeneration also means new generation, inclusiveness. Our Arctic Angel Action Network in 15 countries, soon to be 60, embodies intergenerational mutuality. So from this perspective, letting the polar ice melt on our watch puts too much at risk for future generation of all species, not just humans. The IPP signals that if we stabilize at 1.5 degrees Celsius, the ice can also stabilize. We are currently on a path to 3 degrees Celsius, which the ice cannot survive. The only way forward is to be regenerative on all fronts. We are working hard to do our part by taking the ice crisis to the top of the global agenda. We can restore forests, we can restore habitats, we can clean pollution from rivers, but we cannot plant ice. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Xiye Bastida and I'm an 18-year-old climate justice activist. Thank you so much for allowing me to share my perspective today. I am part of the Fridays for Future movement, which is an international youth-led organization that focuses on tackling the climate crisis through direct action. And I am also the co-founder of ReEarth Initiative, which is an international youth-led organization that focuses on highlighting the intersectionality of the climate crisis. Now, the reason why I started ReEarth Initiative was because of something that has a lot to do with today's session, which is how can we reimagine, how can we rethink, how can we reconnect, how can we re-tap into our love for Mother Nature, how can we use all of that reconnection to not only imagine a better future, but imagine a better present. So thank you again for allowing me to share my thoughts today. We are in a time of crisis, of many crises right now. But we are also in a time of opportunity. We have the opportunity to bring peace to the world. We have the opportunity to turn the violence of the causes and the effects of the climate crisis into action that not only brings balance, but it's peaceful in nature. The youth climate movement started striking in August of 2018. Since then, our movement has evolved, developed, and gotten stronger. Peace is action. Action brings hope. Hope brings dreams. The youth want their hopes and dreams back. And for that, we need to have the courage to imagine not only a regenerative future, but a regenerative present. The most important thing I've learned, and if you are to take anything away from my message today, is this, is that the solutions that are gonna come cannot come from the same thinking that caused the crisis. Namely, the extractive thinking, the exploitative thinking, the capitalist thinking. And that is where our imagination and our innovation must come in. One of the most important pieces, in my opinion, is that gives us the opportunity to imagine a better world, a peaceful world, a world with reciprocity and a regeneration, is the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Why Indigenous peoples, you may ask? Is because Indigenous peoples have been taking care of Mother Earth for thousands of years. They take care of over 80% of the world's biodiversity. That brings balance to our daily lives. They have acquired knowledge about how to live in harmony with Mother Nature. Society must learn how to respect that knowledge and to take pieces from the Declaration of Indigenous Peoples and embed them into our daily lives. One example is Article 13. It states that Indigenous peoples have the right to revitalize and transmit to future generations their histories and philosophies. So if we include local Indigenous philosophy in our classes, in schools, children can learn how to take care of Mother Earth from early life. And that is a philosophy that must be part of our culture. Article 18 states that Indigenous peoples have the right to participate in decision-making in matters that would affect their rights. So we should make it mandatory to have Indigenous voices at all levels of decision-making, from local to federal policy, so that policies that affect Indigenous peoples can be made in a mindful way, which would also, in turn, make our lives more balanced. I would point out, for example, the privatization of water, which Indigenous peoples can help fight against, and it will benefit all of us at the end of the day. Article 25, for example, states that Indigenous peoples have the right to maintain and strengthen their spiritual relationship with the land. So this points to the fact that we have to give Indigenous peoples the right to their sacred sites, which are vital for human connection with Mother Earth, and those territories must have legal protection. That also means protect our oceans, our mountains, our streams, our rivers, our aquifers, our lakes, our forests, and our ancient archaeological sites. Most importantly, I think Article 29 says that Indigenous peoples have the right to conservation and protection of the environment. This was the article that had the most impact on me, because I realized that we need to shift from environmental racism to environmental justice, from exploiting our land to protecting our rivers, from burning fossil fuels to restoring our air, from fracking our land to implementing regenerative agriculture, to not decimate the land, but to revitalize it. We need to make a shift to take care of the environment in a way that becomes part of our culture and our routine and our way of devising development plans. This is a pivotal framework that allows us to respect, recognize, and value Indigenous peoples. And I am so happy that Drawdown has allowed me to share this with you to fuel your own imagination. Because we are on Earth to take care of life, to take care of each other, to take care of our history, to take care of our future. But for all of that to be possible, we need to take care of our now. Thank you.
From the great words of Buckminster Fuller, we are called to be architects of the future, not its victims. Ancestral intelligence is the AI in which I lean on. Right now, the world is undergoing a global evolution, which is integrating developments in biology, materials, and information technologies at an accelerating pace. Therefore, the future of how humans relate to and intertwine with technology, integrated machines, culture, and the planet is being defined at this very moment. After 4 years as a professional football player, I decided to take the accumulated wisdom I gained from my time on the field, to pivot and leverage those experiences to the field of the world. Fascinated by Paul Hawken's solution-based approach to global challenges, my new playbook became natural capitalism. And with a clear direction forward and minimal trepidation, I decided to travel to Europe, following my mentor, an aviation expert by the name of Dirk van Berkel. Initially scheduled to be there for 3 weeks, I ended up exploring and extending my knowledge base throughout Europe for 10 months. Focused on renewable technologies and aviation research, I met with institutions, academia, technologists, and futurists. And after synthesizing my learning through a master's program in adult learning and global change from Linköping University in Sweden, I decided to travel throughout South America with the agenda of understanding ancient wisdoms and learning from local communities to understand how they related to and communed with natural systems. My curiosity kept coming back to 2 provocations. What are the similarities and differences between community and kinship? And what does an authentic symbiotic relationship with the planet truly look and feel like? These questions inspired me to create the World Education Foundation, and ever since 2009, I've been on a quest to begin realizing my vision for a regenerative future. Traveling to over 81 countries and working in 21 of those countries, I built trust with global leaders, gleaned wisdom from local elders, empowered youth, and created livelihoods for multiple communities. During this time, I began to recognize patterns at the nexus of ancient wisdom, modern technology, and future society. Through every year, my work continues to come closer and closer to leaning on indigenous practices in order to understand the relationality between humans and all living systems. And with respect to the Blackfeet Nation, we are flipping Maslow's hierarchy of needs, switching from a focus of the I, and instead create the containers and conditions which allow us to operate as the we within this ecosystem. Through our research over the years, we have understood and synthesized the connections between colonialization, capitalism, and climate change, which my partner Ada Paris coined as the ecological triptych. Through this triptych, we identify colonialization as the ego, and capitalism is the function that drives the ego or supports the ID in certain ways, where the resulting consequence is climate change. So when we look at what regeneration means, it's really about a reconciliation of the fragments that have been created from our disconnect from the planet. And to approach the consequence of the ecological triptych, there are 3 projects I'm currently focusing on that revolve around space, regenerative land development, and personal transformation. Spawned out of my time at Singularity University, I am building out a set of companies called Urban Matrix One and Space Matrix One, which utilize satellite imagery, unique data sets, and machine learning to quantify the sustainability for global infrastructure projects, where social and environmental impact are mapped to the Sustainable Development Goals. As a vertical integration, we are aiming to launch a small satellite constellation with a value add of hyperspectral imaging on onboard machine learning processing. Essentially, we will be able to provide an MRI of the world, identifying vulnerabilities within our ecosystem in real time. Secondly, we are working on a land regeneration project called Regenerative Futures, where we have just signed an agreement to create our first regenerative co-lab on a large ranch in the greater Yellowstone region. Through this beta offering, we will curate a small transdisciplinary group of experts, have them participate in a proprietary 5-phase framework which deconstructs the myth of the ego to begin solving land challenges from a deeply connected orientation. From there, we will begin to generate a new language incorporating artistic expression, emerging technologies, civic solutions, and rethinking of policy. From there, we will deploy this concept as a distributed network of these collabs to activate multiple bioregions starting in North America and extending globally. And if done right, we will be able to set the course for intergenerational transmission of knowledge, ceremony, and practice to connect and enhance our communities, resulting in a human behavior change that reframes our relationships to land, sea, and skyscapes. And to close, my proposed solutions and efforts do not solely revolve around technology in the traditional sense, but rather interweave indigenous wisdom, technological systems, and this living ecosystem to identify and shift the culture, behaviors, and language that serve as the coding material to the future we would like to program. Right now, I'm working with exceptional transdisciplinary individuals who work night and day to create regenerative change. And I look forward to working with additional inspired individuals to meet today's challenges for a brighter future. I will not go silently into the night. I am truly ready to create the regenerative future we all are aspiring to create. Thank you.
Dear friends of Drawdown, dear friends from all over the world, I am sending you my very best wishes as CEO of the German Energy Agency, but even more from Drawdown Europe Research Association. I'm recording this message on Christmas Eve, right over there, My family is waiting to celebrate Christmas with me. It is the end of a year that truly has been remarkable. Many people were suffering from a pandemic which is not yet over. Along this pandemic, our view on things has changed, on the way we live, produce, and consume, but also on the potential every one of us has to change things to a better. And that is why you are listening to this message at the beginning of a new year, which is full of hope. And this little note is my vision of what is coming up and how we are going to achieve it all together. At the beginning of this pandemic, many people were afraid that climate change would lose attention and people would rather focus on stabilizing the old system. As for Germany and Europe, I can tell you that this has not been the case. In the light of all the challenges we were facing, Germany decided to focus on change, on sustainable solutions, and on investing in projects bringing the moment of drawdown a bit closer. Huge parts of our recovery program are dedicated towards finding sustainable solutions. New laws and regulations were passed to phase out coal generation, stimulate renewable energies, as well as facilitate green hydrogen solutions and new mobility concepts. Under the German presidency of the Council of the European Union, focus was led on more ambitious targets, reducing greenhouse gases emissions until 2030. As of 2050, Germany and the EU want to be carbon neutral, and many projects, investment programs, and regulatory shortcomings were addressed and will be tackled in 2021. The European Green Deal is on its way, and it's irreversible. Are we already doing well enough? Certainly not. But the speed of change is increasing, and the willingness of more and more stakeholders from politics, society, and the economy is getting stronger and stronger. Around this time, 4 years ago, the climate community was in shock. Voters in the United States elected a president who would try to reverse all of the country's previous climate achievements, causing immeasurable damage. During that time, now President-elect Joe Biden has been promoting a plan which aims for 100% clean energy and net zero emissions no later than 2050. I remember very well, he said, I promise to start with the implementation on day one. And my dear friends, day one is right around the corner. But even more countries are on their way. China is now committed to being carbon neutral by 2060. Japan committed to achieving climate neutrality by 2050, and South Korea followed just a few days later. All over the world, climate action is near the top of the policy agenda. What we need now and what we all have to work for is concerted action for climate stability, but also for international relations more generally. Currently, the world's three largest industrial powers, the US, Europe, and China, are grappling with fundamental questions of coexistence across a wide range of issues, including trade relations, technology, geopolitical ambitions, human rights, security, and the scope of the free market in general. But understanding that climate policy needs concerted global action might have the potential to bring all of them back to the table and work on a new architecture for the 21st century based on solving this planet. We can build up on all the technology advances we had over the last years and on all the drawdown solutions which have been so carefully calculated and even attached to the SDGs recently in an excellent paper. Solving problems is gaining speed in this decade, and we all will be part of it. Let me tell you a few words on DERA. Drawdown Europe is active and growing. After the design phase in 2019, the team is now working towards real and actionable climate solutions for the European context. We are currently working to onboard new partners, research institutes, universities, and individual researchers to join the European Collaborative. And as a member of the Global Research Collaborative, we will work on creating a consortium approaching a project under the European Green Deal, with the aim to translate drawdown to certain areas and regions in Europe and contribute to the drawdown platform development. I am proud that the team is working so hard on the drawdown idea and the drawdown model. And I want to say thank you to Chad Frischman for all of his support and for being a true friend along all this time. We are delighted to have so many strong and enthusiastic partners and friends all over the world. Dear friends, in a world that is beset by crisis and uncertainty, it is crucial that we seize opportunities for concerted action when they arise. We are now experiencing one of those moments. Let's make this decade our decade. A decade for change. A decade where more and more people understand a better world is possible. Making the most of it will require skilled leadership, backed by a growing community of activists, scientists, entrepreneurs, and policymakers who are committed to meaningful climate action. That is why we all come together to this conference and why it is worth to be part of it. We have promises to keep and miles to go before we sleep and miles to go before we sleep. Wishing you all a great conference and a spectacular world-changing decade to shape. Thank you very much.
Colleagues, it's such a pleasure to meet with you and to talk about the Indian experience. In the past 5 years, we have had 5 years of continuous movement. We have seen renewable energy prices drop. Today, solar electricity is the cheapest electricity that you get in India, at least when the sun is shining. Our immediate challenge is that we get round-the-clock electricity. That means in the day, but as well as at night. Nights is when the peak demand occurs. That we get round-the-clock electricity from renewable energy at prices that are competitive with or cheaper than that from fossil fuels. We are looking then to the large-scale addition of new capacity. You know, in India, approximately 2/3 of the electricity capacity that will exist in 2050 has yet to be built. What an opportunity that all of this will be based on renewables. And that is what we need to work towards. We have also seen an amazingly effective story as far as energy efficiency is concerned. The average air conditioner sold last year was 50%, 50% more efficient than the air conditioner sold in 2010. And we have got similar stories across a range of sectors. What this implies is that every day, every new power station that is built, every new air conditioner that is bought, every new building that is built uses less energy, produces less carbon than the one added yesterday. This is the path to opportunity. As we look forward, we are looking towards enabling economic growth, enabling job growth, and enabling zero carbon emissions as well. We are looking at interventions in the rural sector, where today the largest amount of carbon emissions come from the electricity that is used for pumping water. Moving that to solar pumps makes great sense. How do we make that happen? The Government of India has brought out a program, an initiative to help put those pumps in place and actually buy the excess electricity. That is the electricity beyond that is needed for pumping. Buy that electricity and supply it into local areas. This provides the win-win opportunities that are needed for these kinds of things to happen. We are looking at the creation of water storage facilities at a decentralized rural level, which on the one hand address the problems that occur with climate change, where you've got great volatility of water supply, and on the other side also help in enhancing and preserving the biodiversity that occurs. In other words, we are at a time of great opportunity. We are also looking at a future where the demands, for example, for hydrogen energy and zero carbon hydrogen, that's what's called green hydrogen, are increasing. whether it is in the transport area, whether it is in making steel, and obviously ultimately in making ammonia or fertilizer. In all of those areas, we are looking that green hydrogen becomes competitive by 2030. This is a collective journey. Obviously, users and producers in India are at the forefront, but this is a global collaboration. I look forward to working with everybody in the world to see how we move ahead to this economic, job creating, and zero carbon future.
Hi, I'm Peggy Liu, a proud board member of Drawdown. In the last 40 years since China built its first supermarket and started to rebuild its cities after devastating war and famine, China became the world's biggest source of human-produced carbon dioxide. Now it is undertaking an audacious challenge to clear the karma of damage to Mother Earth, to peak those emissions before 2030 and then go completely carbon neutral by 2060. After I worked on some of the earliest environmental initiatives in China starting in 2007 and seeing that China can embrace societal scale systemic changes like clean energy, smart grid, eco-cities, energy efficient lighting, I see 5 points of light that give me hope that China will find a way to reach this audacious goal of carbon neutrality by 2060. The first point of light is that the Chinese government really sets an optimistic tone for a brighter future by incorporating sustainable living in harmony with the earth into its China Dream. The China Dream is a green dream. This national dream engages all aspects of society. Ads highlight travels to beautiful spots in nature. Images of wild animals and blue skies are pasted all around in subway ads that tout conservation messages like clean water begins with me. Even TV game shows celebrate waste sorting with humor. Every city has a room for VIP visitors with a sweeping diorama accompanied by a cinematic flyover animated video of how beautiful and livable their city is going to be in 20 years. An ecological civilization has become a government mantra where the mountains, the rivers, wind, soil, plants, animals, including us humans, all live in balance and harmony together. Envisioning this collective green China dream is the key to making a better world. The next point of light is that China runs much like a multinational corporation with a national 5-year business plan. This plan carries numerical key performance indicators that strictly fine companies as well as their executives when they are non-compliant. Carrots and sticks help ensure that companies and officials keep China moving together towards a better life. The next point of light is that China's leaders consider the legacy they are leaving behind generations into the future. They are responsible for continuing a civilization that is thousands of years old. This allows leaders to invest in long-term projects that take decades to come to fruition, like ultra-high voltage transmission lines to bring solar and wind power from the north to the cities along the coast, or investing in carbon capture sequestration and nuclear energy innovations that take decades to commercialize, or building smart grid networks across the country to electrify rural areas and up-level energy efficiency, or building hundreds of new eco-cities, each of which take 20 years to develop. The fourth point of light is initiatives like my organization's Food Heroes Healthy Eating Educational Initiative for kids, or the government's Empty Plate campaigns. These are shifting eating habits and reducing food waste. We're now seeing the fruits of our labor as plant-based meats are taking off on menus like Taco Bell and KFC. Non-dairy milks are staples in coffee shops and even pearl milk tea stands. China's Nutrition Society's latest food pyramid even recommends a reduction of red meat. Together, these points of light are creating an upward spiral of radical change, the gigascale change at gigapace that we need to go carbon neutral by 2060. The momentum towards an ecological civilization is there and building. You can see every aspect of society expecting change, preparing for change, and that change is not viewed negatively. The changes required to go carbon neutral and achieve our Green China dream brings positive improvements like technological innovation, increased convenience, more livability, healthier foods and bodies. Indeed, like the 3,000-year-old classic I Ching, or the Book of Changes, this teaches us that change is the only constant in life. So we might as well embrace it wholeheartedly together.
My vision for the future is one where we live in harmony with the earth that we call our home, where fossil fuels are kept in the ground and their emissions are zero, where we focus on reforestation, habitat restoration, where we start to restore the world that we have damaged. And there is a pathway to do this. Here in the United States with our political system, it's very exciting to see our new cabinet appointees by Joe Biden. For example, we're bringing back Gina McCarthy, a previous head of the EPA, and she will assume a newly created role of climate czar in the White House. As well as President-elect Biden has also nominated John Kerry as climate envoy to work with other nations and create global climate action. And the reason why this is so excited is because now we have an incoming federal administration that is listening to youth activists and working with us. And so now we will actually have people listening instead of a group of a bunch of climate deniers freezing out activists. And youth activists, we are also not stopping. We are gearing up to become even more loud than we have ever been before. Continuing our online actions, our digital strikes, our small in-person actions as well. And youth activists are going to make sure that we are represented at the international level as well, like at COP26 in Glasgow, because we realize that youth are the moral and conscious voice to our politicians. And that's why we're going to continue being in the positions where we make sure our voices are heard. And so we are going to continue action, and this movement is going to continue to grow.
Hello, Drawdown 2020. I am so psyched to have a few moments with you. Look, we know we have to do things like getting our electricity sector off fossil fuels and transitioning our transportation sector to electricity, but we also know that there are natural climate solutions that we must get involved in. Right now, our soils, wetlands, our farm sector, trees and forests, that's about 10% of US emissions get sequestered in those means, and it must be so much higher. And that's why I am championing a lot of the issues that are part of our heritage. We know FDR planted over 1 billion trees. I've been pushing this Climate Stewardship Act that is common sense, but aggressively in the right direction. It's planting billions of trees, including over 100 million in urban areas like the one I'm sitting in right now. It provides incentives for our farmers to actually take on practices that sequester carbon and do the kind of work we know must be done. And it makes sure that we are doing the restoration work of our wetlands and making sure that we do and invest in the kind of things that can restore and protect them. It creates something like the Civilian Conservation Corps, getting young people out there working and helping on these projects. This must be a major part of our climate agenda. And that's why I'm psyched about what you all are doing and championing as well. I'm excited to be fighting with you in this noble, righteous fight. I believe that humanity rests in the balance, and we have the power and the ability to claim a victory for our planet, for humanity, for all. So thank you very much for your commitment, and I look forward to continuing to work with you in the future.
Greetings to all from Europe, and many thanks for this invitation. I have been following Project Drawdown for a while now, so I am very pleased to make a contribution today. I am also very pleased to see you highlighting regeneration. It's a word we hear more and more. And what I want to show today is how Europe is building it into policy when we plan for the future. We all understand the context for these plans: the converging and interdependent crisis, a health crisis, a climate crisis, a biodiversity crisis, a resource crisis, and a pollution crisis, all compounded by continued unsustainable production and consumption, while inequalities continue to widen. And on top of that, the pandemic has exposed the fragility of our current socio-economic model. But there is a plus side. More people than ever are now convinced of the need for deep and lasting transformative change. They see that delivering the SDGs and the objectives of the Paris Agreement depends on a healthy planet. And that's why the EU is set on a global green transition, and it's why we are trying to lead by example. We are doing that with what we call the European Green Deal. It's our long-term vision for the environment, the economy, and society. It is an action plan to become a climate-neutral continent, improve people's well-being, and secure a healthy planet for generations to come. And implementing the Green Deal in full is at the heart of our EU recovery plan. It also has a mantra, a green oath: do no harm. We want to make sure that all Green Deal initiatives achieve their objectives in the most effective way, without harming other EU initiatives, as part of an overall drive towards a sustainable future. It's now 1 year old, and we are rolling out the contents at speed. We have proposed a climate law to legally establish that the European Union becomes climate neutral by 2050, and a new greenhouse gases emission reduction target by 2030 from 40 to at least 55%, which was endorsed by EU leaders in December. We have brought detailed plans for different policy areas, including an EU biodiversity strategy for 2030 to protect and restore nature, a farm-to-fork strategy to make our food system sustainable, a circular economy action plan to make our production and consumption systems clean and resource efficient. In a few months, a zero pollution action plan will help us further down the path towards a clean, green transition. The Green Deal is also designed to be socially inclusive. A just transition mechanism will provide support to ensure that the move to a climate-neutral economy leaves no one behind. There is a central place for business and for the front-runners in sustainable innovation, backed by research and innovation support to enable the transition across all the major work streams. We are putting considerable resources into research at the EU level. Our research program, Horizon Europe, takes a forward-looking approach closely focused on impacts to enable the Green Deal transformation. When we talk about regeneration, we aren't just talking about the economy. Despite technological advances, we are completely dependent on healthy ecosystems and the services they provide. That includes water, food, medicines, clothes, energy, shelter, and of course, regulating the climate. And that's why we are making a special effort to step up the implementation of nature-based solutions. They have huge potential, and this year, for the first time, we plan to propose legally binding targets for nature restoration. Specific targets for restoring areas like old-growth forests and peatlands will also help protect the climate. There is still work to do on convincing people of the benefits and getting projects deployed on the ground. And initiatives like Project Down are doing extremely important work here, showcasing solutions and demonstrating how the transition is beneficial for our health and well-being, for the economy, for the planet, and ultimately for our children and grandchildren, and the society they will inherit. But, and I stress this because it's very important, this kind of action will not be enough on its own. It is not a substitute for a rapid phase-out of fossil fuels, and it can't be allowed to delay urgent action to decarbonize our economies. The last thing I want to mention is the global scale of these challenges. Despite the name, the European Green Deal isn't just about Europe. It explicitly recognizes that we can't deal with these challenges in isolation. So it calls for a global dimension to be added to all our policies. And it pushes us to promote them in all appropriate international processes. The Paris Agreement remains the indispensable multilateral framework for global climate action. The 26th Climate COP, to be held in Glasgow in November, must give a boost to global climate action, and the 15th Biodiversity COP in Kunming in the autumn must provide a similar momentum to stop the loss of biodiversity. It's not just about big conferences. We also work towards international agreements to tackle plastic pollution, conserve marine biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction, and fight deforestation worldwide, and much more. We are committed to living up to the Leaders' Pledge for Nature signed by the EU and 80 heads of state recognizing the planetary emergency. All this work will be central in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. We really believe that the transition to sustainability is urgent and necessary. It also offers economic opportunities, but much more importantly, it is our only option. That's the EU perspective, for the people, for the planet, and for future peace. Thank you.